Hello everyone, my name is Rūta Lukošiūnaitė, and today I will present my project about non-commercial urban food cultivation in Lithuanian and Swedish cities. This project has been an exploration of urban food systems and the role municipalities play in supporting them. During this 1 year-long process, I visited 4 different cities, 2 in Lithuania, Kaunas and Tauragė, and 2 in Sweden, Eslöv and Malmö. Both cities are comparable in its size. Malmo and Kaunas are kind of comparable, and Tauragė and Eslöv are comparable in size and population. I am grateful to have had this opportunity to explore this topic and talk about this with different municipalities because of the funding I have received from Sweden-Lithuania cooperation. So urban food cultivation emerged in the 19th century due to fresh food scarcity during the shift from agrarian to industrial society. It gained further momentum during the 1930s economic depression and world wars. Urban food cultivation has been more prevalent in Sweden, especially in larger cities. In Lithuania, it peaked during the post-war Soviet reoccupation. Sweden is among the countries that pioneered urban food cultivation during early industrialization. As early as the 1830s, factory workers, prison guards, and military personnel could grow food in employer-established cultivation areas, though these were not public or municipality organized. Now, these urban cultivation areas look very differently. Within the picture, you can see one of the newest ones. One important social democratic politician was a key promoter of the Swedish allotment garden movement to improve working class living conditions. The first allotment gardens were established in Malmo in 1895, followed by Stockholm in 1904. And by 1916, 37 cities in total had allotments, and by 1945, most Swedish cities and larger communities had them. Today, in Sweden, there are about 51,000 allotment gardens, covering almost 2,000 hectares of land, some of which even have a status of cultural and historic significance. Since around 2010, urban gardens in on public land have emerged in densely populated neighborhoods of larger Swedish cities, with groups gardening in smaller and tighter spaces. Urban food cultivation continues to evolve in Sweden with such experiments as, for example, marine allotment, where people grow algae and oysters in Gothenburg, that started in 2022. When it comes to the urban food cultivation systems in Lithuania, the history is a bit different. In Lithuania, these systems were developed during the second Soviet occupation, which lasted from 1944 to 1991. Along with forced collectivization and urbanization, these gardens were created to combat hunger and unemployment in growing cities. The first allotment gardens appeared in Kaunas in 1949, and they were established by paper factory workers. In 1961, city executive committees were mandated to allocate vacant state land to companies and organizations, which then distributed plots to their employees. So a top-down approach was taken, and over 228,000 allotment garden plots were established in Lithuania, covering over 20,000 hectares. And this is significantly more than Sweden. Unfortunately, after independence in 1991, during a complicated land ownership restoration process, many of these allotment gardens were privatized, most of them. And by 2016, over 70% of these plots became privately owned, with an unclear number converted into single-family homes. Because after 1991, when people got the chance to restore the property rights, they were also allowed to buy a few of these plots, connect them, make the plot bigger, and build family homes. And here in the picture, you can see an example of the old type allotment garden with its own small cottage. And next to it, you can see the developments, how they look now and how big the buildings are appearing in these territories. Cultivation areas were also creating during the same process and disappeared, or seemed to disappear, because I couldn't find anything from legal documents after 1991. Even though people continue to use them till this day, I visited quite a lot of them in Lithuania, and this is from just last year. And people are still using them quite actively. But unfortunately, there are no statistics and information about these sites, nor at municipal level, nor at national. And when it comes to urban gardens on public land, this concept is being tested in Lithuania through various different types of experiments. There is no proper system. Only the capital city is kind of establishing it. And two main waves of urban gardening on public land can be identified. The first one in Lithuania started in 2013, and the second one started in 2019. So my further analysis after visiting all these sites and noticing the different level of development of this urban food cultivation systems, I decided to dive deeper into the system in Malmo to understand it better and to look at the other three cities through the Malmo's lens. And the Malmo system has three different categories in food cultivation, non-commercially, and that is cultivation areas, allotment gardens, and urban gardens on public land. And all these three categories, they are very different. There are significant differences between them, and now I will quickly run through them. So, cultivation areas. It is an individual cultivation form on public land where the municipality leases land to individuals. The purpose of use in these areas is for beginners or experienced gardeners to grow vegetables and flowers mainly, as building a cottage is not permitted, and only some areas allow planting a limited number of fruit trees per plot. Malmo city has an electronic system to register for cultivation lots, distributed based on queue duration. Each day in line counts as a point, and the person with the most points who accepts the offer receives the available plot. It is recommended to inspect the lot before signing the lease with the municipality. If not cancelled, the agreement automatically extends yearly on December 31st, with a 3-month notice required for cancellation. The rent depends on the size and location, and cultivation lots are inspected yearly. Many rules to follow related to waste, irrigation, pesticides, grilling, structures, surfaces, and so on. And in these cultivation areas, you can get a individual plot, which varies in different locations, but to my knowledge, the smallest plots are about 20 square meters, and the biggest plots that one individual can lease reaches to 200 square meters. And this is very different than in Lithuania, what was created during the Soviet reoccupation. In Lithuania, these areas reached from 600 square meters to 1,500 square meters, which is significantly bigger. The second type is allotment gardens. Here, municipality leases out the land to associations, which in turn leases out land to members of the association. There are two different types of allotment gardens in Malmo. There are garden colonies and animal colonies. Animal colonies, you can grow, for example, such animals as rabbits and pigeons, but in garden colonies, which are most of the colonies, you cannot grow animals. All plots are between 200 and 300 square meters, which is also significantly smaller than in Lithuania. In Lithuania, the smallest plot you would get was 600 square meters, and it could reach up to 1,200, 1,500 square meters. Most plots have a tiny cottage, which is light in structure, on poles, and easily removable, built by the renter with a building permit and sold from plot renter to plot renter. It is not permitted to use cottage as a permanent residence, and this is one of the biggest differences between Lithuania and Sweden. In Lithuania, now you can have it as your permanent residence, you can build there a house, and this is not permitted in Sweden. In Sweden, renter must maintain the plot, the cottage, and half of the footpath outside the allotment. Every plot has access to water during the months of April through to October. Multiple measures set in place to control aesthetics of the allotment garden areas, and these to preserve the original character of the cottages and prevent distortions of the overall atmosphere of the areas. This has led to some areas, for example, in Stockholm, even being recognized as culturally and historically significant environments. And there are even 2 museums of allotment gardens, one in Stockholm and one in Landskrona. When it comes to urban gardens on public land, this is quite well described in Malmo city's website. The municipality signs a management agreement for cultivation on public land with associations or organizations. Municipality does not sign these agreements with individuals or companies. Urban gardens on public land must always be open to visitors, as they are on public land and usually they are part of parks, squares, and green areas. So urban gardens on public land are an important part of the cityscape, always accessible to inhabitants and visitors, and they offer benefits like strengthening communities, enhancing biodiversity, improving public health, fostering a connection with nature, increasing neighborhood attractiveness and security. And this is the municipality's view on urban gardens on public land. Cultivation on public land must be non-commercial, and the garden itself has to be at least 5 meters from a road and at least 10 meters from a building, from the nearest building. The municipality must take soil samples to ensure that the area is not contaminated before the garden, before the agreement, I guess, is signed and before gardening starts taking place. So if samples are not taken or the soil is unsuitable for cultivation, cultivation can still be done in raised beds with separating soil cloth. All physical changes, objects anchored in the ground, such as bushes, fences, sheds, seating, and activities like composting must be approved by the municipality, and that helps to keep the aesthetic view agreeable and acceptable for all parties. Each garden ends up unique in its layout, activities, and number of people involved. And now I will give a very short overview of what is the situation in each of the cities that I visited. So the first is Malmo, and Malmo is the third biggest city in Sweden, with a well-developed urban food cultivation system that has all of these three categories present. In 1881, Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage and Green Parks was founded in Malmo, and this society introduced allotment gardens after the Danish model on the almost 2 hectares of leased land. The society ran the first 4 colonies in the city until each formed their own associations. Currently, at least 175 hectares of land is dedicated to the urban food cultivation system in Malmo municipality. The first urban community garden was established in 2011 with a generous support of around 20,000 euros from the municipality. The second city in Sweden is Eslöv, and Eslöv is a small town with around 284 allotment gardens in 5 different locations. And this takes up around 13.5 hectares of land. Municipality is not actively working on developing the urban food cultivation system. Their explanation was that they actually have, as an industrial town, they have a lot of soil contamination, and there are also plans to remove the oldest and smallest allotment garden area in 2025, and this area was established in 1947, while the newest area was created in 1982. So since 1982, Eslöv municipality hasn't really worked on developing the urban food cultivation system. Then I want to talk about the city of Kaunas. And city of Kaunas is the second largest city in Lithuania, and it has an unmonitored urban food cultivation system facing systemic destruction and low municipal priority. All three urban food cultivation categories are present within the city boundaries. It is likely that majority of allotment gardens have been privatized and converted to single-family homes. It is extremely unlikely that this trend will change. Therefore, allotment gardens will cease to exist. The majority of cultivation areas disappeared, and the remaining few are planned to be cleared out to make way for new municipal park developments. Currently, preservation of the last historic sites of the urban food cultivation system and 3 experiments of urban community gardens are initiated by a small local NGO. From hundreds of hectares in the 1980s, the urban cultivation system now shrunk to around 2 hectares. And the final city, Tauragė, it is a small town with a urban food cultivation system made up of 2 allotment gardens that are outside of the city territory. There are at least 7 cultivation areas, which are also the type that are illegal. Both of these categories are under the same development trajectory as in Kaunas, and most likely they will disappear quite soon. And currently there are no urban community gardens in Tauragė town. So urban food cultivation has developed differently in Sweden and Lithuania due to their distinct histories. Despite both countries having weak regulation on urban food cultivation systems nationally, Malmo has established an effective system. In Sweden, food cultivation in cities is traditionally integrated into urban life and well maintained, whereas in Lithuania, allotment gardens and cultivation areas have been systematically dismantled since 1991. And for the end, I also have visual representations of each of these cities. And each darker, smaller bubble kind of represents each type. Allotment gardens are in dark orange, cultivation plots are in purple, and urban gardens on public land are green. And we can see in the map where they are in Malmo that what kind of system is in Eslöv, Kaunas, and Tauragė. The light yellow circles is a radius of 1 kilometer. So in this way, we can see how reachable urban gardening is the city for its inhabitants. And we can see that Malmo and Eslöv are actually doing quite well in this regard. Even though in Eslöv, most of them are private allotment gardens, because of the strict aesthetic rules, you can still easily walk there and enjoy at least the view of cultivating food in the city. While in Kaunas and Tauragė, allotment gardens are basically extinct. Cultivation plots also. And comparing Tauragė and Kaunas, only in Kaunas there are these 3 experimental urban cultivation areas where a small NGO is trying to preserve the system and raise the questions if all Lithuanian cities should or should not develop these urban food systems. So this is the outcome of my project and visits to all 4 different cities. I think this overview is a useful look at the mirror, maybe more useful for Lithuanian cities. I hope that Lithuanian cities will reverse this negative trend, and Swedish cities will continue showing a great example and debate more on urban food cultivation. Thank you very much for your attention.